Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Steven from LearnEnglishGoPlaces.com. Today, I want to talk about the key to learning languages. And this is one key, maybe not the only key, but I think it's very important. And that's why I called it the key. And I think it doesn't get talked about that much. And this key to learning languages is understanding the metaphors in a particular language. If you can really understand the metaphors in a language, then you can really get inside that language and understand how that language works and how people who speak that language think. So, the key to learning languages is to understand the metaphors that those languages use. So, the key to learning English is to understand the metaphors that we use in English. And the metaphors are the symbols or the things that we use to represent other things. So we talk about certain things, we express certain ideas in terms of things that are more tangible, things that are more concrete. And we use those more concrete things to talk about things that are more abstract. Um, every language does this. Every language uses metaphors and symbols to express meaning. And languages use many of the same kinds of metaphors from language to language, but everyone is different. And the way that these metaphors work in each language is different. And I think it's one of the things that makes learning languages so interesting. But I think if you really want to speak well and understand English and be able to communicate like a native speaker, it's really important to understand the metaphorical language in English and understand how things work. I think there's a lot of emphasis sometimes in English on learning idioms and learning expressions like "I was over the moon about this" or "it was raining cats and dogs," and these kinds of expressions like this, these idioms. I think these idioms are kind of really exaggerated um, ways of talking about things that this is not really what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the key to learning languages. I'm talking about something that's much more subtle. I'm talking about something that is really kind of baked into the language. Even just there, I used a metaphor that may not be used in other languages. I said that it was baked in. So it means it's somehow a part of the language in a subtle way, almost as if you were baking a cake, and there's certain ingredients that are baked into it, like eggs or um, sugar or whatever, the cocoa powder. These things are baked in. You can't easily extract it. It's part of the cake. It's part of these metaphors are kind of built into the language. They're part of the language. And so whenever we speak English, we're always using metaphors. And it's not like these silly idioms, not that they're silly, but it's not these idioms that you're going to learn in a textbook, right? It's like the you're actually these metaphors are like very subtle and they're sort of like baked into the language. So if you can really master these metaphors, understand them, it actually informs it. I should say it actually represents how an English speaker thinks. These metaphors tell a story about how we think to some extent. To some extent. And so I just wanted to throw out just a couple of examples of how we might use metaphorical language in really very subtle ways. Um, and so let's get into some of the examples. One is using a preposition um, to describe something that really is we wouldn't normally use a preposition for. Let me give you an example. So I might say something like this. I might say, my brother is really into basketball. My brother is really into basketball. And so we use that preposition into. My brother is really into basketball. What does that mean? Well, if you speak English and you are somewhat familiar with the language, you may recognize this statement as meaning my brother is really excited about basketball, really loves basketball, really he's obsessed with basketball. He's really into basketball. So we're using some kind of metaphorical language here because into has to do with being inside something, right? And so like if you have a swimming pool and you jump into the swimming pool, you're now immersed in it. You're inside it. And so that's the same idea here. It's like you like something so much or you're so obsessed with it that you're actually completely submerged in it, right? So you're really into it. So we use this a lot, like, oh, this he's really into sports, this guy's really into drama, this guy's really into theater, right? Being into something, right? And I don't think you would see that in a lot of other languages. I mean, there might be some language where people use that metaphor of being inside something to talk about being really obsessed with it, right? But I don't think it's super common, right? So that's one of the very kind of unique things about English is that or any language, is that every language has its own set of unique metaphors that you really have to learn to like really have the spirit of the language inside you, right? Um, couple of other examples I have written down here. I don't want to make this a really long video. I'll just give you one more example, another preposition. And there's so many examples, and I hope to get to a lot of them on this channel. One of them, another way that you can use a preposition. Let's say you're going out for a coffee with a friend of yours, and both of you are going to pay for your coffees, and your friend says to you, "Hey, this coffee's on me," right? It means that if you're familiar with English, you probably know that that means that your friend wants to treat you to a cup of coffee, wants to pay for your coffee, right? So he says, it's on me, right? So it doesn't really make a lot of sense literally. Like the coffee is on the person's head or something. It's not like that. It's a metaphorical meaning. Somehow um, the person is saying that they're going to cover your coffee. I don't know where it comes from. Maybe it comes from the expression "put it on my tab." You put something on somebody's tab, it means you put that item on their bill, right? So maybe that's where it comes from, like to put it to put it on. Put that coffee on me. Put that on my tab. So we're using this kind of preposition on, which is like you actually put something on the surface of something. You say, "Put that item on me." Put it on me. It just means I'm going to pay for it, right? So it's not really a literal meaning, but it's a very subtle kind of um, metaphorical meaning. And these might not be the best examples, but I just wanted to kind of talk to you guys about the way that these metaphors are really baked into the English language, and it's really important to kind of learn how we think and the kinds of metaphors that we use in daily life. And I think a lot of the way that metaphors are used across languages, I think a lot of it is universal. But I think the specific ways that languages use metaphors can be very different from one another. So it's just something to think about. And I'm not really talking about idioms. I'm talking about things that are much more subtle, things that are much more baked into the language. I hope this is helpful and gives you some ideas. I hope to develop this concept a little bit more in future videos. As always, thanks for joining me. Please like and consider subscribing if you appreciate these kinds of videos. And I hope to see you in the next one.